I am Adam Henshaw and I run GTM at Foldly. And with me today, we have Andrew Miller, co-founder and head of GTM at Omada. How are we doing, Andrew?
I'm doing great, doing great. How are you?
Good. Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Um, Seen some good numbers this past month, so very pleased about those. Um, I think the first thing I wanted to kick off with um, is some little intros uh, for yourself. What led you into marketing? How long you've been in marketing? How much change have you seen in the industry? And what is it you're doing now with Omada?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate the invite. Looking forward to seeing where this discussion takes us. To walk back, and I'm not gonna, do a whole, monologue here and take the entire show talking about background, but I've been in marketing, primarily growth marketing and B2B SaaS for almost 20 plus years. Every time I say that and I'm talking to other tech people, I'm like, yeah, I'm old. I get it. I'm definitely old in the industry. But it's because you love it, right? You love what you're doing. You stay in it. You stick with it. And seen a lot of changes in 20 years. I mean, I first started primarily on the SEO side. And that was back whenever you built an entire like department of writers and you do outbound, guest post publishing, and you kind of build up that machine. So that's where I started, and that was for a marketing agency that focused primarily on the legal space. And so, of course, a lot has changed, but a lot has still kind of stayed the same. You still need quality backlinks from trusted sites. So that's still, here and relevant, but my scope has changed quite a bit. So being mostly in SaaS and on the growth side, we all know that, like you were talking about earlier, metrics matter. And so with growth, it's all about finding some sort of, statistical significance in the test experience to validate that motion that you're working on makes sense to increase, your spend, and that you can report to your VCs or your CEO or whoever your boss is to say, hey, what I'm doing actually is making an impact. A lot of times the tests don't directly impact, but you learn from it. And so that's a lot of what I've been doing. I've led growth at many wonderful organizations, Agora Pulse, Zimbly, mostly, on the growth side, but also have had the sales kind of area that is kind of like fallen into there. So understanding both. Right now, I'm one of the co-founders at Omada, which is basically a full marketing team for small businesses. So a different vertical than the enterprise SaaS that I've mostly been in, working with those businesses that on every corner of every city that you live in, like that barbershop, that hair salon, the plumber down the street, helping those individuals who really don't want to do marketing and don't want to have a second job and figuring all that out. And so we built a platform to really help them on that side. And so I run the GTM side, that's marketing, sales, and NCS.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I think the switch from enterprise to the small business is probably one where, when we talk about different channels to
Oh
utilize,
yeah.
the channel difference is going to be huge.
Mm.
How have you found that switch? And what channels maybe are you kind of less investing in or more investing in?
Yeah. That's a great question. So a lot of times it just comes down to testing and understanding who your ICP is, right? So I can't go into any organization and say, this channel is going to work for you, because you have no idea until you actually go out there. There's benchmarks, there's data, there's best practices that say, yeah, outbound has worked. It works. I mean, you have to send a lot of messages, or you have to be really, really tailored on the enterprise side, which is like the ABM motion, to kind of get there. And that usually just opens up the door and starts the conversation. Other, foundational elements. Oh yeah, paid works. Paid works really well. And then you jump into there and it's like, well, am I getting my customer acquisition costs to a reasonable point that will actually make money, eventually? It is like yes or no. So understanding like the numbers behind it. SEO we know works. I mean, with a lot of the LLMs that are being built in and search behavior somewhat changing with different ICPs, there's other, steps that you have to take in kind of managing that. But again, it's really understanding like who is your ICP and what can we do to go where they are, and then jumping into those areas. So an example with a company that I led growth for called Orbit, a lot of their customers were developers. And so developers are not going to answer, like, or jump on like an email that I send around. They're not going to really respond. That could be a secondary touch point, but they're not going to respond to an ad that's running through. You need to jump into like a Reddit conversation, even though everybody as a marketer is scared of Reddit because it is tough. But they're there, or they're in like GitHub, or and they're these other areas. Discord, heavy users of Discord. So you have to jump into these communities and not hard sell, but like build up relationships there. And then you could utilize other secondary tactics to like follow up with them. It's like, oh yeah, we connected on Discord. Now I'll send you an email. And of course you have to make sure that your email doesn't bounce. That's something that I have noticed on a lot of organizations that I've consulted with and worked with. We they jump in there, right? Not understanding all the technical aspects that go into making sure your email gets into the inbox and not into the spam, not into these other areas. And I've done that myself, like, oh, 15 plus years ago. It's just like, oh, I just got all these emails. Great. I'm just going to blast them from my Gmail account. It didn't go through, right? Or you jump into an organization and you have like no separate domain or anything like that. And then all of a sudden your, product emails are no longer making it to the people. Even things such as like, hey, your bill's coming up. This is important, in spam. They never saw it. So whenever they get charged, you get the email saying, hey, I never got a reminder. What's going on? So that's where it's so important for marketing to have an understanding, and then also talk to the dev teams on, yes, we can set up these emails, these automated sequences, all these things, but you need to make sure you have your like ducks in a row. No cold outbound from your core domain. No other thing. Don't buy a brand new domain without going through the process of properly setting it up, and all that stuff. So outbound has been a very strong traction channel for me. That's why I'm kind of like leaning into talking about that. I do utilize a lot of different, traction channels as long as they're valid, but that's always a consistent one. Even with the rise of personalized AI messages, and how everything all of a sudden, like, everybody's an expert at cold outbound, and this 16-year-old emails me and says, hey, I can get you 25 customers, in a week, guarantee. How are you going to do it? Well, set up instantly and blast out, 5,000 emails, and then, do all this. It's like, yeah, the thing that I find really important is that every single touch point is a representation of your brand. So if you go and do a pray and spray, there are the technical, logistical things that are going to impact you, such as like your domain getting blacklisted, which is rough. But beyond that, it's the customer sentiment. They're going to keep seeing these emails popping up, and they'll be like, oh no, spam, like, who is this? And that sets up like a bad experience when you finally do get through, because it takes, but it used to be like 3 to 6 touch points to get somebody to convert, even with digital body language. Now we're seeing with the oversaturation, 6 to 12, and that's when they're in market, right? When they're actually ready to buy. So you need to get to them in other channels. But if you're just blasting them over and over and over in email, when they do see your ad, they're gonna be like, oh no, I remember this person. Or they sent me something kind of sketch. Never mind. So I guess the high level there is just making sure that you're very targeted. If you do cold outbound, which is such a solid channel when done right. And it's such a horrible channel for your brand when done wrong.
Completely, yeah. I think I was talking to Marta from our sales team. Some of the listeners may have met her, may have spoken to her. And she was telling me about conversations she's had to have with clients to say, don't just ask ChatGPT for an email cadence and then throw it straight in and use it and do something. There's no way that's gonna make it through the inboxes at any kind of
Yeah.
scale. Um, and I think that kind of in that conversation really inspired, I think, um, the kind of line of questioning for today's
Yeah.
call, because the different channels have changed in a sense. Like it is easier now to set up outbound, for example,
Yeah,
than it ever was before. And I
absolutely.
think it's easier to do content of any kind. Like that's become a metered commodity. Like it's easier to do so many of these things, but like if anything, at first, maybe you could get a whole load of stuff out and think things were going right, but then you encounter obstacles, and it might be
Mhm.
like what you've described there, of course, the blacklisting. It might be kind of falling into spam. It might be a whole range of other things that come from you not doing it properly and not doing it with the right infrastructure and the right approach and the way that adds value to the user. But the same, I think, maybe is true for content. You look at, people who maybe produced 100,000 pages almost overnight, using AI, and
Wow.
then they find it looks like great traffic's coming in, then Google punishes them,
Uh,
and their traffic goes through the floor, you know? There's this combative element, it feels, where
yeah.
there's give and there's take. Some of these channels are getting easier or better, but then actually no, and you're not sure where you stand. And I did feel like a lot of it comes down to whether you're using something or doing something in a spammy way. Um, but maybe this is a philosophical question. What counts as spammy? Because I feel like it's changed since I kind of maybe started in the industry. Like, what do you think counts as spammy when it comes to marketing tactics? You know?
Yeah, yeah. So I think, well, not I think, I know, and this is what I tell all of my team, and I also ask myself before I send any email is like, would I want to receive this? Like, is this adding any type of value? And it's such a fundamental and basic question, right? You think about it, it's like, oh yeah, I want to be adding value to somebody. I mean, the whole reason like companies exist is ideally to add some sort of value and make people's lives a little bit better. But what happens is on the sales side, on the marketing side, we have metrics that we're looking at. And then we get too, I think, too far removed from the end user. And we're looking at those metrics. And all it comes down to is a numbers game. Oh, if I send 1,000 emails with this, general script, I should get this many opens. And then from those, those opens, I'll get this kind of click through rate if I have a link there, or this kind of reply rate or whatever. And so what I have to do is I just need to increase that volume so that I can get more calls, more qualified, leads and get up, and the whole thing and just like mapping out the funnel. But, if you take a step back, is that opening line that you just sent, is that catching attention? Sure, maybe, but is that going to get them to take the next step and really, get on a call that is adding any type of value to their life? And the vast majority of time, it's no. And that's why we all jump into our inbox and we're scared. I know a lot of people don't want to say it, but that term of I'm going to get to inbox zero, it's like, how? I open up my email, there's like 830 emails not read. And it's like, none of them, maybe like 2 are, relevant. But you set up your own. This is where you have to take additional steps, right? You have to set up your own filters and parameters and say, okay, only people from my company, only people from there, which makes it even harder to cut through the noise. So that's why you have to really think about, is this going to do something that catches their attention? And not just catch their attention like through like some like cheap tricks like, hey, guess what? I put up a billboard, outside of your school with your name on it. Did you see it? And when they respond, if this is a real life example of some people I've worked with, uh, didn't continue working with them, but like they were like blasting all these out, and hey, we're getting great response rates, we're getting open rates. And people are like, oh, I didn't see the billboard. Where is it? Because nobody put a billboard up. That was a way to like catch the attention and say, oh, that was on your street. It was personalized with AI and all that. A horrible, horrible strategy. It added no value. It was all just like trying to catch the attention, like, oh, somebody paid for a billboard. But then wait, no, they didn't. Oh, that just degraded trust because you just basically lied to me. You said you did that. It's the worst thing you could do. So you come in there and you're like, okay, what can I really bring as a company, to this person to make their life better? And so that's where understanding who you're messaging matters. Are you messaging the gatekeeper so that you can, if this is enterprise, right? So that you can get to the decision maker for a call. How do you convert that gatekeeper because they're getting all these emails into your advocate so that you can have that conversation with them and then they start internally networking and working on your behalf there. Like what is it that really clicks for them? I mean, there's like fun things after you get through. They're like, hey, I'm going to send them some, cookies. Everybody loves cookies, several things. But what is it that really is going to, help them at the end of the day? And like with Omada, we're reaching out to people that are overwhelmed. You think of like somebody in Austin, Texas, who owns a hair salon. This is an actual customer of mine. She runs that salon. It has 36 chairs in there. And so each chair she's managing because those are stylists, but she's also cutting hair and she has a 3.5-year-old. And I know the pains of that because I have my own. She's 4 now, but it's a lot. So running around, it's like she does not have time to do marketing. I mean, she told me she spends 90 minutes to make a 10-second Instagram clip. That's a lot. And she's like,
Yeah.
when do I have 90 uninterrupted minutes to do this? Like, I don't because the kid's running around. I have all these things. There's just no way. So when you can come in there and like directly add value, it's like, do you do you like marketing? And they're usually like, no, no, like I hate marketing. I don't want to do marketing. Can you help me? It's like, yeah, 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 I can. This is exactly like show, don't tell, right? This is exactly for you. This is how you do it. And so you just walk through that. That can be applied to any organization. You just find what's really helping them and what their blockers are and walk in there. It's not hard selling. If they're a fit, they'll jump into it. If they're not a fit, then it won't work. No matter how many, persuasive, strategies you go in there with, they're going to churn because, everybody, if they get, tricked into purchasing, they get that, sleazy car salesman. No offense to the auto industry. I worked in that for a while, but it's like, no, and then now with SaaS, you just click cancel and there you go. So,
Yeah, completely. I think the bit of adding value, maintaining trust, I think is more relevant in SaaS than it is in probably most other industries. It's unlikely you're
yeah,
going to take that car back
yeah,
uh, immediately. You know what I mean? Whereas with SaaS, you've built your entire revenue model on the premise that they are going to stay for maybe it's 6, maybe it's 12, maybe it's
lifetime value. Yeah.
18, 24 months, whatever it might be. If you're bringing the wrong person in, it's expensive. Like they're going to
Oh,
churn
yeah.
really quick, and suddenly what you thought was your customer acquisition cost is actually like way higher, and you've got a big problem. Um, so yeah, it completely changes and impacts it. I think one thing I wanted to ask there as well. I mean, for something like outbound email, obviously it's super easy to scale in theory. In practice, that's why people come to Foldly because there's a whole load of infrastructural things and email hygiene and list hygiene and everything that needs to be done in order to do that scaling. But still, that's pretty easy. You come along, you plug some tools in, Foldly being one of them, and you can then start to increase the amount you're sending and taking it places. I feel like it's one of the most scalable channels, but something like PPC, for example, very scalable
Mm,
too. Content maybe now is scalable in a way that it wasn't before. It's
right.
hard to say.
Yeah.
I think we still need to see the landscape, but that strikes those kind of that scalability strikes me as what seed, Series A, Series B kind of really care about because the first challenge is finding one that works, finding one
Right.
that like vaguely has good numbers for you, which, as we both know, is a challenge. But once you've got them, then you're like, fantastic. The business is gonna work forever now. But like in reality, you pour a bunch of money in the top, and it doesn't always scale linearly. It can break. It can go places. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
how do you feel like AI has impacted some of those calculations and changes recently?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, a great question and also like great setup. Um, with any organization, seed, pre-seed, Series A, Series B, by Series B, you should be in a pretty good spot that you have like 3 core traction channels, so you're good. But before that, you're still figuring out, true product market fit. And then once you finally get that product market fit, you're jumping into like what is a scalable traction channel. And so that comes down to testing things and having like an organized process behind that. So before you jump into anything, a lot of marketers don't put together like their hypothesis and their null hypothesis and have like a brief together to say what does success look like and what does failure look like, so that you can learn from it and not just keep running, these tests infinitely and having an infinite loop of, well, I'm putting money in it. I think we're getting something from this. It's like you have to track this very closely, especially whenever you aren't like flush with capital, and that it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, even if you get, you raise your next round and they say, hey, pour more fuel on the fire, you still have to have your unit economics there to get to the next round or to actually make it work. And if you're driving in all these customers, but like you said, it's churning like really quickly, then your company is not growing because it's much more expensive to acquire a customer than to actually like keep them and then expand, because that expansion motion is where a lot of the revenue really comes from. On the AI side, I mean, just plugging those into a lot of these systems, if you have it trained and tuned properly, and also if you're using, don't just use like, you know, chat GPT, like the free version, or, Claude. Is like, jump into the professional side, or jump into like the higher level tiers there that keep your information private. Because even though they say, oh, they're not sharing it, if you put anything in there that is customer related, like an email, beyond an email, like addresses, if you're in Europe, there's GDPR issues, right? If you're not in Europe and you're working with enterprise, that's SOC 2 compliant issues that are you're going to get hit with, and that holds a lot of weight and a lot of penalties. So those are things to be very, very aware of, as you're like playing around with these tools. But I mean, they definitely have helped, I'd say, make A players like more productive. The thing is, you have to know what you're instructing it to do. You can't just jump in there and say, hey, build out my PPC campaign for me. I think I'm going after this person. I think I'm going after there. It's the same thing as any tool, right? If you jump into like a programmatic, SEM tool, when you jump on there, you still have to give it guide rails. It doesn't just automatically know exactly what to do, even if it's built to help you distribute it and jump on, the bids here and get, cheaper, returns. You still have to be able to set those parameters up at the beginning. So I'd say that's the same thing with AI. It is a force multiplier by every, way that you can look at it, but you have to be able to instruct it properly, and it's only as good as the data that you put in. I think it was Eric Sue. I'm a big follower of him. He runs like Single Grain and all these other organizations, but he just shared about setting the difference between having like an open loop and a closed loop network. And so he utilizes AI in a lot of the things that he does, but when you utilize like Claude skills and build these other things inside there, and you have a closed loop system, it's learning every time that you do it, as opposed to, I'm just jumping into a new prompt and I'm just going to do this. Or, hey, this tool says it uses AI, but you have no idea the black box behind it and what it's actually doing. So you end up with like something really random, or if it's running ads and you're spending money, you jump on it the next day and it's like, I didn't set a limit and I just spent $100,000. Did we get any conversions? That's the first thing you go to. And it's like, I mean, Google, when Google just has its typical like Google Max, right? Whenever you're running ads. And that scares me to death, even whenever it's learning, because it's just like, I'm going on everything, I'm blasting it out. So I think AI is a great tool, but you have to still be able to guide it in the proper way and then go through it. And if you don't have that background or that knowledge, it's going to make it difficult, because a lot of things sound really good. You're like, you get the feedback back. It's like, wow, that was great. That was great. I'm gonna send that out. Let's do it. And then somebody who actually understands it looks at that and is like, yeah, that's AI slop. I don't know what you just did and sent over to me. Yeah. So I mean, I could keep going on there, but I think that kind of summarizes. Great tool. You just have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, completely, completely. I think like you mentioned, obviously about kind of GDPR and SOC 2 and stuff like this. You know, it's one of those. In a sense, the more you feed AI, the better it's going to be able to
Absolutely.
pull context and then produce outcomes. But like, when we speak to people who are like fintech SaaS companies, for
Yeah.
example, in heavily regulated spaces,
Banking.
they've got to
Yeah.
be SOC 2, they've got everything like this, and it's like, how can you then be leveraging AI in ways where you do bring in context, but you've got to bring it in such a controlled way because you've got to be responsible with your customer data, and then you can leverage it and try and take it places.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy thing to do, I think, but it is that kind of sense where you've kind of then got to build with AI rather than just like turn up to AI and be like, how
Yeah.
do I do this? It's
Yeah.
kind of that closed and open loop, I feel, between how you interact with it. I noticed that we're coming up to time. I'll give one or two quick fire.
Hmm.
Um, we said about 2026, but let's say 2027 or just into the future as things continue to develop. Any particular channel you think might get more interesting as time goes on, more
Hmm.
useful?
I'll say quick fire. I think the bringing back old school human to human relationships, I think is going to be very interesting. You're seeing that events, and not just like the mass, again, pray and spray events, but actually like creating those interactions like Winter does. In Austin, Texas, they have like Winterfest every year. It's not a typical meetup. It's one to one, like Dave, Gearhart with his events up in Vermont. They're like, again,
Mm,
it's like outside, the typical, meetup space, or just like standing up there in seminars. It's really building the relationships. So I think that leaning heavily into relationship building in the community space and everything around there, I think that's going to blow up because we are getting AI overwhelmed and AI saturated. So it's going to be leaning more into what can't be easily replicable. And then people are going to have that bias towards, hey, that was harder to build, so I'm going to trust it more. Everything else, I mean, there's so much more that can happen, and so many other cool things that I probably can't even imagine. But that's the first one that pops up.
sounds good. Sounds good. I completely agree. Trust and value, the kind of core concepts of the conversation, coming in strong there on a community play. Um, Thank you very much, everyone, for checking this out. And I hope you all have a good one. Bye.
Cool. Thank you.